Namaskar, and good morning, everybody, and welcome to this class. Special thanks for this wonderful song. I really didn't expect this. For those who have understood this song, this talk will be redundant. Anyhow, today we begin a two-part discussion of the twin subjects of love of God and self-surrender. In today's part, we'll try to find answers to a few crucial, practical questions. What does it mean to love God? Can we really love God? And what does it take for people like us to be able to love God? Let us begin with a simple question. What is love of God? I mean, true love of God. Nobody in this world can live without love. Only the object of love differs from person to person. We run after either people and earthly pleasure, or we run after God and divine bliss. This running after God is what spiritual life is all about. God is said to be in us. He is said to work through us. When we actually begin to feel this, our attitude gradually changes. But first, we must become conscious of our true divine nature, at least to some extent, because it is our true nature that shares God's divinity. That higher self is an essential part of God. As Swami Vivekananda said, religion is the eternal relationship of the eternal soul with the eternal God. So I repeat it. Religion is the eternal relationship of the eternal soul with the eternal God. That is why a clear conception of God or reality is very necessary for us spiritual aspirants. Whether we are bhaktas or jnanis or yogis. Now, our ordinary love for people and things is mostly blind, instinctive. It is based on ignorance. Love of God is nothing like that. It's always based on some higher form of intuition. It is not love as it is understood in the worldly sense. Ordinarily, our love flows downward like a stream, whereas loving God is like turning the stream back to its source. God is the reservoir from whom all streams of human love originate. To the extent we become pure in heart, we come to know of our true higher nature and come in touch with the God dwelling within. In order to achieve this purity, we will have to rise above our lower nature. Jnanis try to do this by controlling the mind with an effort of the will. than the dearest person or thing in the world. And we must be able to feel his presence within. By intense sadhana, we should make our heart purer and purer and increase our love for God, the love that is now mixed up with various worldly desires. True bhakti means total one-pointedness of love. Every feeling of ours must be centered in God, and nothing else must be allowed to attract us or draw us away from God. In this way, when we consciously and steadily direct all our thoughts, feelings, emotions, and desires towards God, they all become purified and sublimated. Then we understand what true bhakti is, or love of God is. This is also how we avoid a great danger in spiritual life, the danger of having strong but unsublimated feelings and emotions within us. So, this is what our bhakti is at present. Now let us compare this with the God-centered relationship that existed, say, between Sri Ramakrishna and his disciples. Words can't describe the purity and depth of that love. Narendra, as you know, was the foremost of the Master's disciples. The Master loved him dearly and showed his affection openly in various ways. The very sight of Narendra would throw him into ecstasy. But once, the Master subjected his disciple to a severe test. He suddenly began to treat him with utter indifference. When Narendra came and saluted him, he would turn his face away and be silent. And when the boy left the room, he would start talking with others. Sri Ramakrishna kept up this attitude of indifference for weeks, but Narendra continued to visit him as usual. After a full month's testing, Sri Ramakrishna asked his young disciple, "I don't look at you, I don't exchange a single word with you, and still you come. How is that?" And Naren replies, "Sir, do you think I come here only to listen to you? I love you and I want to see you. That is why I come." Now, that is unselfish love. Another time, Narendra himself tells Sri Ramakrishna not to get too attached to him. When he hears this, the childlike Sri Ramakrishna at once runs to Mother Kali's temple and seeks her advice, her opinion. And the Divine Mother assures him, actually reveals to him, that he loves his young disciples because he sees the Lord himself in them. And the day he couldn't do that, he wouldn't be able to bear even the sight of them. Mother shows him this. So, Sri Ramakrishna's love for his disciples was no ordinary love. It was based on, it was a spiritual kinship that was based on the direct experience of God's immanence in all beings and his special manifestation in pure souls like Narendra and other disciples. In this form of love, It is not the little I, but the divine spirit that is the center of attraction. This is what divine love is. The Bhagavad Gita mentions 4 types of devotees who worship God. Those who are in distress, those who seek wealth and enjoyment, those who seek knowledge, and those who are endowed with wisdom. Krishna says all of them are noble souls, all of them are devotees. But the last type, the jnani, is the dearest to the Lord. So what does this mean? The illumined soul sees God in all beings and is always in loving communion with Him. He is unaffected by any apparent defects or faults in others. So, people are of various types, and their attitudes towards life and reality also vary very widely. The out and out worldly people don't care at all about God or spirituality. They have an excessive craving for money and enjoyment, and they're mortally afraid of suffering. Another type of worldly minded people do have a place for God in their scheme of life, but they look upon Him mostly as the bestower of boons, the giver of material prosperity and enjoyment. They too have great hankering for pleasures and are afraid of suffering. Then there are those who are part worldly minded and part spiritual minded, who cling to worldly pleasures even as they worship God. They seem to confuse even the unpleasant for the pleasant, although they also feel miserable at the same time. This is a curious category. And then, somewhere in the middle, between the worldly minded and the spiritual minded, there are some matter of fact people who have little to do with God, but still look upon the joys and sorrows of life as inevitable, and they try to take things as they are. Then we have philosophically minded people who accept happiness and misery as the result of their own good or bad karma and try to live their lives as best as they can. Then come religious people, God-fearing people, who take everything as God's gift and try to remain contented and unaffected as far as possible. They try to live a dharmic life, a life devoted to cultivating virtue, and they go about their duties to the best of their ability. Finally, we have spiritual seekers. Spiritual seekers who regard happiness and misery not necessarily as rewards and punishments for their actions, but as inseparable opposites of worldly existence. They try to live a positively God-oriented life, a life of purity, non-attachment, spiritual practice, and selfless service. In both happiness and misery, they remain balanced and strive their utmost to live the higher life. They refuse to be disturbed by the pairs of opposites. So, they have some stability about them. Now, the love of predominantly worldly people is, as we all know, outwardly selfish. The lover cares only about his or her happiness. Then, the love of those who are in the middle of the spectrum between worldly and spiritual. Their love is characterized by a spirit of give and take. The lovers think of mutual happiness. Only the love of spiritual people is unselfish. Truly spiritual people are so selfless, selfless, that they don't think of their own happiness. Their whole being is focused on those whom they love and serve. And they are the happiest people. If we say we love God but don't experience happiness and fulfillment, there is something wrong with that love. Pure love, untainted by selfishness, is sure to bring us great joy and fulfillment. We may not realize it, but sometimes God snatches away things that we cling to so that we may develop pure, unselfish love for Him. Spiritual life often entails poverty and sorrow at the physical level, but all these are many times necessary to help us attain pure love, and through that pure love, supreme bliss in the end. God is our greatest treasure, and in order to make place for Him, we have to get rid of all the glass beads and trinkets that we have accumulated. So, at present, our love is mixed with a great deal of selfishness. But love of God will make us selfless and give us great strength. We have to turn to the original source of all love and power, God. True, we are only instruments in His hands, but let us not forget that instruments also act. And as instruments in God's hands, our strength increases manifold. That is the power of divine love. We have all received a drop of that divine love. Otherwise, life itself would have been impossible, unbearable. But we have adulterated it with a lot of selfishness. We need to purify it. Self-love is in everyone. The challenge is how to sublimate it, how to transmute it. As you know, in science, sublimation is a process of purification. In Christianity, they call it purgation. It is the task of a lifetime for us spiritual aspirants to purify our love. How are we supposed to do it? We can begin by remembering one simple little truth. Just as God dwells in me, He dwells in all. If we don't keep this in mind, the love of today will turn to hatred tomorrow. Our love is at present correlated with hatred, whether we like the idea or not. Whereas pure love is love for its own sake. If we can't maintain this attitude, we must at least return the love that we receive to begin with. Then comes a state when we want to give more than we receive. And the highest state is when one doesn't think of oneself at all. One just gives and gives without expecting anything in return. This is what the saints and mystics are. So, we have to keep increasing our love for God. Not satisfied with this little trace of love that we go about calling bhakti. He is present in all as the indwelling self. If we keep this in mind, then our love for others also increases and in a much purer form. After all, it is God who connects us all. We begin with personal love, human love. Then we gradually realize that we are spiritual beings, more souls than bodies. We are parts of the Supreme Soul or God. Our attitude towards ourselves and others changes. Human love is replaced by spiritual kinship. Attachment is replaced by love. Selfishness is replaced by service. That is true love. This love we have to intensify and share with others. Again and again, we have to try to think of God who is present in every heart and treat everyone with due respect and reverence. Mere human love, the love for one's own relatives and friends, is all selfish. As we just heard, this love is just a drop of God's infinite divine love. We have to connect the two. The question is, how? By recognizing and acknowledging God's presence in all beings, even in those who dislike us. That will help us love everybody equally and selfishly and in the right spirit. That is to say, impersonally. Yes, these things are easily said. But to be able to put them into actual practice, one has to gain firm control not over only one's, not over on one's desires, but also on one's emotions and impulses, both good and bad. Because emotions being emotions, from a good emotion to a bad emotion, it's only one short step. So emotions need to be kept under control, and we have to learn to direct them along spiritual channels. Whenever we feel like expressing our love for another person, which is quite natural, we must be careful. If we truly love the person, we will naturally want to help and serve them. But even this, we should do in a detached, impersonal manner. If we feel ourselves too weak to do this, it is best to withdraw and silently pray for them. In fact, this is the advice that our elders give to young devotees who take spiritual life seriously, especially to monastic aspirants. Those who have already attained a certain degree of inner purity are advised to be extra careful in externalizing their emotions and feelings, particularly the soft ones. So, the mind has to be washed constantly. If it is careless in small things, it will be prone to carelessness in big things also. We don't get a new mind when we have to deal with serious things. It is the same old mind. To the extent we are able to love God and God alone, and feel an interest in worshiping Him through selfless service, To that extent, our spiritual life becomes safe and it becomes fruitful. Somehow or other, the idea of God has to be brought into whatever we do, even when the mind tends to be attracted to worldly things. In our case, love of God is something that has to be cultivated. And it can be done through hard, sincere practice. Sometimes people wonder, they ask, is love not something that is natural, spontaneous? If that were really so, then such a great psychologist as Erich Fromm wouldn't have written the book called Art of Love. He has explored the different facets of love, including love of God, in that valuable book. That means love is something, even our human love, there is much that has to be cultivated. Anyhow, I was talking about practicing the art of love. In fact, this is how we awaken the mind and make it more and more aware, more and more conscious, by making God the only goal, the pole star of our life. The truth is, we can't really live a spiritual life if we can't love God. The greatest thing in our life as devotees is to transmute our human love into love for God. Here it is encouraging to know that even in the worst kind of attachment, there is a core of pure love. All we need to do is get rid of the dross, get rid of the impurity. This is what spiritual practice, bhakti yoga, is all about. It is also good to remember that no matter what happens to us with regard to other people, whether we are deserted by them or we are separated from them in any other way, the Lord will never forsake us, nor can we be separated from Him, for the simple fact that we are eternal portions of Him, as we heard in the beginning. So, let us turn all our love to Him and learn to love others through His love. That is to say, love others not through personal love, but in and through the divine and for the sake of the divine in them. Let there be a little touch of God's pure love for us in our love for others. Sri Ramakrishna spoke so much about giving our tendencies the Godward turn. The ego asserts itself again and again. So he said, make it the servant of the Lord. If desires and passions refuse to be controlled, give them a Godward turn without lessening their intensity. Instead of longing for human company, yearn for union with God. As we grow older, as we near the end of our lives, we will anyway see that it is only He who can fill the void we feel within. Only He can give us permanent peace. The Bhagavad also says, desire, anger, and fear, affection, love, and friendship, when these are turned towards Hari, they lead to absorption in Him. Instead of being angry with those standing in the way of our worldly enjoyments, be angry with the obstacles that lie on your spiritual path. Let us be angry with our own failings and weaknesses and avoid them all as our great enemies. Instead of wishing to possess another human doll or worldly trinket, let us covet God and His inexhaustible spiritual wealth, which can never be lost. So, God is the philosopher's stone whose very touch converts the 6 enemies of spiritual life and transmutes them. The 6 enemies: lust, anger, greed, delusion, pride, jealousy. Arishadvargas: Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya. So, God's touch has the power to transmute them all into pure devotion. It also brings to mind the Lord's great assurance in the Bhagavad Gita. Even the most sinful man, if he worships me with unswerving devotion, must be regarded as noble and virtuous. For he has formed the right resolve. That much is enough. He soon becomes righteous and attains eternal peace. Proclaim it boldly, Arjuna. Proclaim it boldly. My devotee never perishes. Now, it may be that a person is fully convinced of the harmful effects, of the detrimental effects of his worldly tendencies, but is still not able to get rid of them. What is such a person to do? One way is to try to control them using willpower. Another way is to cultivate the witness attitude towards them. Neither of them is easy, and in the beginning of spiritual life, almost impossible. Then what is the way for people like us spiritual aspirants? There is actually no other way than to connect everything, all worldly tendencies, with the divine. In whatever way we can, directly or indirectly. Every desire, every sensual impulse, every passion must be given a Godward turn. Consciously and knowingly, with an effort of the will. For an example, if I have a keen aesthetic sense and my desire to enjoy art is very strong, I should take up some holy form of art and make use of it to rise to a higher spiritual level. Instead of listening to light, frivolous music, I can listen to devotional music. Instead of singing to please people, I can sing to please God. If I admire the beauty of flowers, I can grow them and offer them at the altar. Decorate the altar tastefully. If I have a weakness for dainty dishes, I can take the trouble of preparing them with my own hands and offering them to God. In the same way, if I feel love and attraction for anybody, I should love the God who dwells in that person and be directly attracted to that God within. These are not mere poetical fantasies. This is what the saints and mystics themselves have practiced. And this is what they recommend to us. If we practice these things consciously and knowingly, They act as a great controlling factor, something like an inner regulator that helps us sublimate our worldly tendencies. This is how we give them a higher turn and attain greater and greater purity. Our ultimate goal is to realize God, but all these little practices serve as stepping stones to that. So, to take up an attitude, any attitude that suits us, and follow it methodically, that is actually the only way we can rise to the level of pure spiritual love. This Godward turn must be given to all our relationships with external things, because God is everywhere and He is in everything. But to be able to be aware of it, we should learn to be conscious, be wide awake. We need to be less impulsive and more reflective. But usually we are so careless and easygoing in all this that we do just the opposite and bring no end of trouble to ourselves. Sooner or later, we have to fully recognize the fact of the unity of all souls in God in the right way. At present, we acknowledge it rather half-heartedly. And to tell the truth, without real dispassion and detachment, without vairagya, we can't recognize this fact of God's presence in all wholeheartedly, let alone live according to it. If we were convinced that God, the one indivisible spirit, resides equally in all beings, it would be impossible for us to have any strong attraction or aversion to a particular person. We would naturally turn our attention to the principle behind the personality. It doesn't mean that we have to behave like fools and be indiscriminate regarding the company we keep. No. We should still know a tiger to be a tiger, as Sri Ramakrishna would say. We should know a tiger to be a tiger, despite the fact that God dwells in the tiger too. But we need not go and try to embrace it. We should know that God dwells in all men and women, but this knowledge shouldn't prevent us from being a little discreet, discriminating, and being careful as long as we are on the phenomenal plane. That is the point. We should see the pure spirit at the back of a worldly person leading an impure and immoral life, but we should not get intimate with them for the time being. This is very, very important. If we ignore this rule, one day we will surely slip and come to grief. A spiritual aspirant can never be too careful in this matter. So, whenever we find ourselves wanting to mix with everybody freely, let us step back and ask ourselves, is everything all right with me? Am I sure that it is not my old desire for worldly company and enjoyment trying to drag me down? Have I attained sufficient strength, sufficient inner purity? The point is, to the extent we actually feel the presence of the one indivisible spirit called God in all our emotions of love and hatred, attachment and aversion will diminish and lose their strength and influence. Ordinarily, these emotions cloud our understanding, but we must be able to stress the spirit more than the form, more than the personalities and objects that attract us. But so long as our clinging to this little personality of ours, our craving for sense enjoyment continue to cloud our understanding, we can never really think of God or the one indivisible spirit. And that is why we keep committing the same old blunders over and over again. So here we see the connection between vairagya and bhakti, dispassion and devotion. So we need to cultivate dispassion as much as possible. Without that, love of God, pure love of God, is out of the question. But now, dispassion has both its negative and positive aspects. On the negative side, we try to disconnect ourselves from others. On the positive side, we try to connect ourselves with the divine in them. If we do this now, later on, we can reconnect with others only through the divine and never again in a direct, personal way. When human love is somehow connected with God, it gradually gets transmuted. But if it is not so connected, it invariably degenerates and ends in misery. Generally, we people have such strong identification with the body and all that is related to it, whether physical or mental, that we just brush aside God, so to say. You may have noticed this. Whenever there is any talk about God or spiritual matters, the first reaction you meet with is skepticism. How do we know God exists? Even if He does exist, how can we possibly know Him? And if you can't see Him and know Him, how can we love Him? And so on and so forth. This skepticism with regard to God is itself an indication of our excessive clinging to the ego and its desires, because of which God is pushed out. That is the fact. Sri Ramakrishna says, if a man has no desire at all for money and enjoyment, then what is there to stop him from getting a vision of God? It is so true. So long as my heart is full of desires for pleasure and possession, full of egotism and vanity, God has no place in my life. So, if my mind is unable to believe that God exists, if my heart is incapable of any feeling of love for Him, I don't have to ask why. I should know that deep down in the hidden regions of my being, worldliness has made its home. And I should first get rid of that. So long as I allow it to stay, I will be unable to love God. Just think of it. How much time we spend in being social. How much energy we waste worrying about what others think of us. It is just like meditation, so intense, but calling up false images and false feelings. This is not how we progress in spiritual life. Instead of busying ourselves with such false dolls and puppets of the world, if only we devoted all that time and energy to our chosen ideal, what wonderful progress we could make. We ourselves say that we are nothing but puppets in God's hands. What are we without the puppeteer and such things? Then why all this attraction and aversion? Why all these strong likes and dislikes? Instead of concentrating all our emotions on God, our true love, He is always right here within us. He never leaves us in the lurch, never disappoints us, never brings us pain or frustration. But we must know how to make Him our very own. We must learn how to be in His company, how to devote ourselves wholly to Him. If we make our own Ishtadevata, our own chosen deity, our true love, we will be saved from the worry of these hundreds of false human loves binding us to the world and preventing our spiritual progress. Without rising above them, we will never know what true love, what true freedom are. First of all, our attitude towards ourselves is wrong. So naturally, our attitude towards others also becomes wrong. If we watch our thoughts during the day, we'll find hundreds of false worldly loves occupying our heart. So we must be wide awake, be on our guard. We must analyze our thoughts and feelings dispassionately and not allow these false loves to forge invisible bonds and bind us to them. The only way we can do this is by holding on to our true love, our chosen deity, and try to dissolve, try to merge all false loves into the true love. There has to be an undercurrent of mind always connected with God, and we try to replace all other forms, whether attractive or repellent, with His divine form. Because our body consciousness is so deep-rooted and strong, we can't help thinking in terms of the body. So, as soon as we find the image of any person rising in the mind that is not helpful to our spiritual progress, let us try to replace it at once with the luminous form of the chosen deity. Let us try to think of Him intensely. Let us try to repeat His holy name. The idea is that God should occupy our mind as much as possible. In his famous little book, Inspired Talks, Swamiji says, theorizing about God will not do. We must love and work. Give up the world and all worldly things, especially while the plant is tender. Day and night think of God and think of nothing else as far as possible. The daily necessary thoughts can all be thought through God. Eat to Him, drink to Him, sleep to Him, see Him in all. Talk of God to others. This is most beneficial. Such a great jnani like Vivekananda says these words. So even our daily necessary thinking can all be done through God, Swamiji says. If we can do this, we will see for ourselves how much needless disturbance and frustration have gone out of our lives, and how happy, how free, and how spiritually fruitful our lives have become. Thank you. Now, before closing, I have a couple of happy announcements to make. Next Sunday, we will have just a quiet meditation session. No talk. And on Monday, on the 3rd of November, Revered Swami Sarvadevanandaji Maharaj is visiting us for a few days. He'll be here with us until Thursday. But on Tuesday morning, he has some time, and he has agreed to give spiritual initiation to any devotee who is interested. This is for your information. So you can write to us or contact Revered Maharaj for details about these things. Thank you all. And I invite everybody to join us for some light refreshments.